I never thought I'd say this, but my brother's handwriting made me cry. It was barely legible, shaky and rushed, like he hadn't written in years. And maybe he hadn't. But the second I saw the return address on that package, my heart dropped into my stomach. Subscribe to Karma Encrypted for more real, raw, and emotional stories like this. Your support helps us keep sharing what truly matters. I'm Harper Ellison, 34 years old, a nurse, and for the last 7 years, I've lived my life pretending my older brother didn't exist. Or at least trying to. You don't just forget someone who held your hand through every thunderstorm as a child. Who taught you how to throw a baseball? Who cheered the loudest at your high school graduation? But you also don't easily forgive the man who vanished when your mother died. Who didn't show up to the funeral. Who didn't answer your calls when dad fell sick. Who missed your wedding and never acknowledged your divorce. Who chose silence like it was safer than facing the truth. And now, here I was, holding a worn-out cardboard box with his name on it. To be honest, I almost didn't open it. It sat on the kitchen counter for 3 days. I'd pass by it in the morning on my way to work, glance at it when pouring wine at night, sometimes even catch myself reaching for the packing tape just to yank it open, but then something in me would tighten. Why now? I lived alone in a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of town. My friends said it was cozy. I thought it was just enough space for my sadness to echo. There were photos of friends and co-workers lining my walls, but not a single one of my family. Not since everything fell apart. On the 4th night, I came home from work and sat down in front of the box with a cup of cold tea. I ran my fingers over the address label again. Ethan Ellison. Fremont, California. Still in the Bay. I hadn't heard his name spoken out loud since I'd said it in anger during a therapy session 2 years ago. I took a breath and peeled the box open. Inside was a smaller, neatly wrapped gift. Navy paper with a silver ribbon. I hesitated. Beneath it, folded carefully, was a letter. His handwriting was shaky but familiar. I started reading. Harper. If you're reading this, I know it's probably because you debated throwing this away. I wouldn't blame you if you had. But I need you to know something before I go any further. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't have a good excuse. I didn't call because I didn't know how to face you. I didn't come to the funeral because I was ashamed. And I didn't return because I thought I was too broken to deserve a family. But lately I've realized something. Regret is a prison you build with your own hands. And I'm tired of the walls. This gift is complicated. But I hope it gives you even a fraction of the peace it's given me. I love you. I never stopped. Ethan. I didn't cry immediately. I just sat there, holding that single piece of paper as if it might explain 7 years of silence. It didn't, of course. But it did something I hadn't expected. It cracked the bitterness. My hands trembled as I untied the ribbon and unwrapped the gift. Inside was a medium-sized wooden box, the kind you'd see in antique shops. A faded brass clasp, aged corners. I opened it. At first glance, it looked like a collection of random items, a faded photograph of the two of us on bikes as kids, a folded newspaper clipping about a music festival we snuck out to in college, and a dried rose I immediately recognized, from the corsage he bought me for prom when no one else asked me. But then I noticed a small black USB stick. There was no label, no instructions. I turned it over in my hand, unsure. But curiosity overruled caution, and I plugged it into my laptop. It took a second to load. Then a folder appeared, for Harper. Inside were dozens of voice recordings. The first one started playing automatically. Hey Harp. It's Ethan. I know it's been a long time, but I wanted to talk to you. Really talk. I've been recording this over the last year. Kind of like a diary, I guess. I didn't know if I'd ever have the courage to send it. But if you're listening now, it means I finally did. I clutched the edge of my desk. I wanted to tell you the whole truth, about why I left what I was going through, and why I stayed gone. You deserved so much better. And I didn't know how to be the brother you needed. The sound quality was rough, but his voice was unmistakable. He laughed softly, nervously. I hadn't heard that laugh in years. That night, I sat in the dark, listening to every single message. Some were 2 minutes long. Others went on for 10. He talked about the guilt that ate at him, the therapy he started, the breakdown he had after Mom's funeral. He spoke about my wedding, how he watched it online in silence. How he cried when he saw me in white. He talked about the baby he lost. About the partner who left him. About the years he wasted numbing himself with work and bad decisions. But most of all, he talked about me. About missing me. About remembering how I'd once bandaged his scraped knees and told him he could be anything. At 2:13 a.m., after hours of listening, I finally cried. Not because it erased everything, but because I'd missed him too. And in some strange, indescribable way, that gift wasn't just a box of memories. It was an olive branch, a lifeline thrown across a canyon I thought we'd never bridge. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Not because I was ill, but because I needed to do something I'd buried under fear and resentment for too long. I opened my email. Typed in his address. Subject, just one question. Then I sat, fingers hovering over the keyboard. And I wrote, "Do you want to come home for Christmas?" The cursor blinked. Once. Twice. A dozen times. And still I stared at that email, wondering if I was insane for sending it. "Do you want to come home for Christmas?" It had been 7 years since Ethan and I had been in the same room. 7 years since he vanished into silence and left me alone with the chaos of Mom's death, Dad's illness, and everything else that followed. I didn't know if he'd answer. I didn't know if he even celebrated Christmas anymore. But that morning, after spending the entire night listening to his voice, his pain, his memories, his apologies, I knew I couldn't pretend I hadn't heard it. I clicked send. And then I did what I hadn't done in a long time. I waited. I kept checking my inbox every hour, like a teenager waiting for a crush to text back. I'd close my laptop, swear I'd give it space, and 2 minutes later be hovering over it again with nervous fingers. At work, I was distracted. I charted medication wrong on a patient's log and had to correct it before the system flagged it. I bumped into the same cart twice in the hallway and spilled a cup of lukewarm coffee all over my own scrubs. Karen, one of the other nurses, finally asked if everything was okay. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just didn't sleep." She raised an eyebrow but didn't press. Thank God. By the time I got home, my nerves were frayed. I tossed my keys on the kitchen counter and made a beeline for my laptop. One new message. My stomach dropped. From Ethan Ellison. Subject, "I thought you'd never ask." Harper. Yes. God, yes. I've thought about that question every December since I left, and I never had the courage to ask it first. I'm not who I used to be, Harp. But I'm trying to become someone you can trust again. Tell me what to bring. I'll be there. E. I covered my mouth and just breathed. Not cried. Not yet. But something in me exhaled. Something I didn't even know I'd been holding on to since the day he disappeared. He was coming home. Preparing for Ethan's arrival was like preparing for a hurricane you couldn't predict. I cleaned the apartment top to bottom, twice. I rearranged the guest room, bought new sheets, changed them again, then changed them back. I stocked up on groceries, then questioned every item. Would he even eat this? Did he still like peppermint hot chocolate? Was he vegan now? I hadn't seen him in so long, he could have been an entirely different person. But the moment I saw him walk through my front door, carrying a duffel bag over one shoulder and wearing that old army green jacket from college, I knew. It was still Ethan. Older. Quieter. Tired around the eyes. But still my brother. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I whispered. We stood there for a second, awkward and uncertain. Then he stepped forward, arms slightly raised, unsure. I didn't hesitate. I hugged him. It wasn't graceful. I knocked the duffel off his shoulder, and he nearly dropped his phone. But when my arms wrapped around his back and I felt him hug me tightly, desperately, every damn wall I'd built around my heart cracked open. "I missed you," I choked. "I missed you too," he murmured into my hair. "So much." We stood in my entryway for a long time. Two grown adults holding on to each other like kids who'd gotten lost at the mall. Eventually, we made our way inside. He looked around my apartment like he was trying to memorize it. Like he didn't want to forget it again. "You kept the plant," he said, nodding toward the scraggly jade on the windowsill. "Barely alive, but yeah." He smiled, and suddenly we weren't strangers anymore. We were Harper and Ethan again. That night, we stayed up talking until 3 a.m. We sat on the living room floor with blankets, leftover spaghetti, and old Christmas music playing softly in the background. The lights from the tree glowed gently beside us. He told me everything. The panic attack that sent him running after Mom's funeral. The drinking. The job he almost lost. The therapist who finally made him see he wasn't a monster, just broken. He told me about a woman he'd loved and lost. About how ashamed he felt watching my life move on from the sidelines, too afraid to step back in. I listened. And when it was my turn, I didn't hold back. I told him how angry I was when he didn't show up. How alone I felt. How I screamed his name in the parking lot of the hospice center when Dad died, as if he might appear out of nowhere. How I stopped talking about him to protect myself from the pain. And how I never stopped hoping I'd see his name in my inbox. He cried then. Not loudly. Just a quiet tear down his cheek. I handed him a tissue and didn't say a word. We'd said enough for one night. Before bed, he handed me something wrapped in brown paper. Another gift? I teased gently. Not exactly, he said. Just something I couldn't leave behind. I unwrapped it slowly. It was a photo frame. Inside was a picture of us on Christmas morning when I was 9 and he was 13. We were sitting by the tree in footy pajamas, grinning, each holding up a matching book. I gasped. Where did you find this? In Dad's box of keepsakes, he said. I figured, maybe it could go on your wall again. I didn't realize how empty my walls had looked until I hung it the next day. Christmas Eve was quiet but warm. Just the two of us. No big feast, no extended family, just cinnamon rolls, spiced cider, and a rerun of It's a Wonderful Life on my old TV. And honestly, it was perfect. Ethan even put on a ridiculous Santa hat halfway through and started doing impressions. I laughed harder than I had in years. But the real surprise came Christmas morning. I was stirring cocoa in the kitchen when Ethan walked in holding a small package. Another one? I asked, smiling. This is the last, I swear. I opened it. Inside was a folded letter and a second USB stick. I frowned. It's a message, he said softly. From someone else. I glanced up. Who? Dad. I froze. Ethan took a breath. The night before he passed, he asked me to record something. Said he wasn't strong enough to talk to you in person, but he wanted you to know some things. I've been carrying it with me all these years, waiting for the right time. I sat down slowly. You don't have to listen now, he said. Or ever. But it's yours. My hands trembled as I took it from him. That night, after he'd gone to bed, I listened. Hi baby girl, Dad's voice came through the speaker, soft and gravelly. I know I haven't always said the right things, and I sure as hell didn't raise you perfectly. But I want you to know, no matter what happens, I'm proud of you. You were the glue, Hopper. The strength. The one who held us together when I fell apart. I see you. I love you. And I forgive Ethan. I hope you can too. Don't carry the weight alone, sweetheart. Let people love you. Let your brother back in. You deserve that. I pressed my palm to my mouth as silent tears slid down my face. I'd waited years for someone to say those words. And they came in a voice I thought I'd never hear again. I didn't sleep much that night. But I woke up lighter than I had in years. Ethan stayed through New Year's. What was originally supposed to be a 3-day visit turned into nearly 2 weeks, and to my surprise, I didn't mind. We settled into an easy rhythm, like we'd always lived together, even though our last real time under the same roof was back in Dad's house, before life crumbled and divided us. There was something so comforting about waking up to the smell of coffee that wasn't my own. Hearing footsteps in the hall. Watching bad TV with someone next to me instead of across a text thread. But there was one thing we hadn't talked about yet. The house. The one Dad left us both in his will. The one I refused to set foot in since the day the hospice van pulled away with his empty wheelchair. It sat locked and untouched on the other side of town, a 2-story colonial with blue shutters, overgrown hedges, and a mailbox that still bore Dad's name in fading black letters, Ellison. I stopped by it yesterday, Ethan said one morning as we sat eating cereal in our pajamas. The old willow tree in the backyard still hanging on. I looked up. You went alone? He nodded. Just drove past. Couldn't go in. Silence stretched between us. I haven't been back either, I admitted. Keys are in the drawer. Been there since the funeral. He didn't pressure me. Just nodded again. But something lingered in the air between us for the rest of the day. Later that evening, I walked past the drawer and paused. My fingers hovered over the handle before I opened it and stared at the familiar set of keys. I pulled them out slowly. Let's go tomorrow, I said quietly. Ethan looked up from the couch. Are you sure? No, I said truthfully. But we need to. The next morning, we drove in silence. Not tense silence. More like respectful anticipation. The kind that fills the air when you're about to enter a place that used to feel like home but now holds ghosts. The neighborhood hadn't changed much. Same uneven sidewalks. Same neighbor's porch with a wind chime that never stopped squeaking in the breeze. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw the faint outline of my childhood welcome mat, half buried in leaves. Wipe your paws. It read, faded paw prints grinning up at me. My throat tightened. Ethan reached for my hand and squeezed. We don't have to stay long. I nodded and stepped out of the car. The key slid into the lock like no time had passed. And then the door opened, and the air hit me. That familiar mix of wood, dust, and something floral. Probably the remnants of whatever plug-in scent Dad had last used. The house was dark but intact. No vandalism. No decay. Just paused. Like it had been waiting for someone to come home. We stepped inside slowly, each footstep sounding louder than the last. I turned on a lamp near the entry table, and the soft glow revealed everything just as we'd left it. The family photo wall still hung with crooked frames. Our childhood photos mixed with graduation shots, a framed sketch I drew in kindergarten, and one black and white picture of Mom on the porch, laughing, wind in her hair. I reached out and traced the edge of the frame. She always said she hated this picture, I whispered. Because it showed her wrinkle, Ethan added. We both chuckled quietly. We moved from room to room, stopping every few feet to touch a memory. The living room where we built blanket forts and watched late-night cartoons. The kitchen where Mom taught me how to make banana bread and Dad burned eggs on Sunday mornings like it was tradition. The stairs creaked in all the same places. My bedroom door still had a sticker on the knob. Keep out unless you're cute or bringing snacks. Ethan's room was exactly as he left it, posters peeling, bed still unmade. On the desk sat an old Polaroid of us in Halloween costumes. He was a vampire, I was a very tiny, very sparkly pumpkin. But it wasn't until we opened the door to that room that the weight of everything hit us both. Dad's office. It had always been a sacred space. Off limits when we were kids. Then, after Mom died, it became more of a sanctuary for him. A place to grieve, to hide, to write. Now it was a time capsule. The old desk, papers neatly stacked. His leather chair, still indented where he used to sit. A dusty globe on the bookshelf. And on the wall, a framed quote we used to laugh at, "I'm silently correcting your grammar." I walked to the desk and saw a journal lying open. My name was written at the top of the page. I blinked. Ethan. He moved closer. There were several entries. Letters, really. Dated over the course of a year. Each one written to me. March 14th. Harper called today. I didn't answer. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But what would I say? I don't even know how to talk to her anymore. She deserves better than this shell of a man. May 3rd. Watched her from the porch when she dropped off groceries. She didn't see me. She looked so tired. I wonder if she's sleeping at all. I hate myself for hiding. August 20th. Ethan emailed. Said he wants to talk to her. I told him not to. Not until he's ready to show up and stay. I won't let him hurt her again. I couldn't breathe. These entries, they were windows into the mind of a man I thought I'd known completely. I'd painted Dad as strong, stoic, and detached. But these words showed vulnerability. Shame. Fear. Ethan was quiet beside me, reading too. Then he stepped back and opened a drawer in the desk. Inside were envelopes. Dozens of them. All addressed to me. I think he wrote to you, Ethan whispered. But never sent them. I reached in and pulled one out. Opened it. Inside was a photo of me in my nursing scrubs, smiling at a hospital fundraiser. And a note in Dad's handwriting. She's saving lives. My daughter is saving lives. I wish her mother could see this. I burst into tears. Not the quiet kind. The ugly, sobbing, body-shaking kind that comes when you realize someone loved you far more deeply than they ever said out loud. Ethan knelt beside me, pulling me into his arms, and we cried together. That night, we boxed everything we wanted to keep: photos, journals, Dad's cufflinks, even the broken guitar that neither of us could ever tune properly. As we were packing up, Ethan found a sealed envelope taped to the underside of the desk. It was labeled simply, "To both of you." We opened it together. Inside was a handwritten note and a small deed document. I know I messed up a lot of things. But one thing I did right was raising 2 kids who loved each other more than they knew. This house is yours. Both of yours. Do what you want with it. Sell it, keep it, burn it to the ground, I don't care. But before you decide, spend one night here together. Talk. Laugh. Remember. Make one last memory in the home that raised you. Love, always, Dad. We did exactly what he asked. We ordered Chinese takeout, put sleeping bags in the living room, and watched old home videos on Ethan's laptop. Footage of birthdays, vacations, awkward haircuts, and one clip where we tried to choreograph a dance to NSYNC and fell over laughing. I hadn't laughed like that in years. Somewhere around 2 a.m., I looked at Ethan and said, "We should keep the house." He smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." The decision to keep the house wasn't made lightly. It came after hours of walking from room to room, sitting in silence on the front porch, and breathing in memories that both soothed and stabbed. But in the end, we both agreed. It wasn't just a house. It was a scrapbook of who we were, a monument to what we survived, and maybe, just maybe, a place to begin again. So we kept it. But that also meant work. A lot of it. The very next morning, I found Ethan crouched in the garage, pulling rusted tools from an old cabinet and grinning like a kid at Christmas. "I forgot how much junk Dad hoarded," he said, holding up a tangled mess of extension cords. "I think this one dates back to the Clinton administration." "Careful," I smirked. "You're starting to sound like him." Ethan straightened, mock offended. "I take that as a compliment." We spent the next week clearing out years of dust and decay. We scrubbed floors, repainted the kitchen, and battled an entire family of spiders that had claimed the linen closet as their kingdom. I screamed, Ethan laughed and threw a towel at me. By day 3, we'd fallen into a rhythm. I handled the sorting and organizing, true to my inner control freak, and Ethan did the heavy lifting, whistling 90s pop songs as he hauled boxes to the curb. And every night, after our bodies ached and our hands were raw, we sat on the front steps with drinks in hand and talked about everything and nothing. One night, I asked him something I hadn't dared to say out loud yet. "Do you think Dad would be proud of us?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think he already was. He just didn't know how to say it." I nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the stars. "Yeah, I think you're right." We started discovering treasures in the most unexpected places. In the attic, hidden behind a dusty tarp, we found a trunk full of Mom's things: her favorite perfume, pressed flowers from her garden, a scarf I used to play dress-up with when I was 5. I pressed it to my face and inhaled. It still smelled faintly like her. Ethan sat cross-legged beside me, holding a tiny box of cassette tapes. "Remember this?" he asked, pulling one out labeled Family Mix No. 4. "Please don't," I groaned, covering my face. "That's the one with you rapping to Vanilla Ice." He grinned. "And you singing Britney Spears in a fake British accent." Oh God. We laughed so hard we cried. And in that moment, surrounded by dust and nostalgia, I realized something: healing didn't come all at once. It came in flashes, unexpected, untidy, and sometimes hidden inside a box you hadn't opened in years. A few days later, we hosted our first dinner in the house. Just the 2 of us, nothing fancy: baked ziti, garlic bread, and a bottle of wine Ethan picked up from the corner store. We ate on the back porch, fairy lights strung up around the old railing, candles flickering in the breeze. "This feels weird," I said as I twirled pasta around my fork. "Like we're adults now or something." Ethan raised his glass. "To adulthood. Late, messy, and somehow still standing." I clinked mine against his. "Barely." Halfway through dinner, he got serious. I need to ask you something, he said, leaning forward. Okay. He took a deep breath. Would you want to renovate the upstairs? I mean, fully. Make it modern. Open it up. Maybe, make it into a space we can share. I tilted my head. Share. Like, co-own. I live here part-time. You live here. Or rent it out when I'm not around. Keep it in the family. Make it something we're both proud of. I blinked. You'd come back regularly? If you let me. I looked around. The porch. The flickering lights. The ghosts that no longer haunted me the way they used to. And I nodded. Yes. Renovations started in February. We hired a contractor named Phil who smelled like sawdust and peppermint, and who had exactly one facial expression, grumpy. But the man was a miracle worker. Walls came down. New windows went in. The kitchen was transformed from a yellow-tinged relic into a sleek, airy space that Mom would have adored. We added a reading nook under the stairs, and Ethan turned the old office into a music room, with Dad's broken guitar mounted proudly on the wall. Every crack in that thing tells a story, he said as he drilled it into place. I took a picture of it and smiled. We even painted the hallway a soft sky blue, the same color as the summer dresses Mom used to wear. It felt right. Like she was still part of it all. March brought snow, then sunshine, then snow again. But inside that house, warmth bloomed. Not just from the new insulation, but from the feeling of rebuilding something, together. One afternoon, as I painted the guest room, Ethan popped in holding his phone. Got a weird email, he said. Scam? No. It's from Aunt Claire. I froze. Claire was Mom's sister. We hadn't heard from her in over a decade, not since the family fallout after Mom's funeral. She lived in Oregon, ran a little bookstore, and had ghosted the family ever since. What does she want? I asked, brush pausing mid-stroke. She says she heard about Dad's passing. Wants to visit. I raised an eyebrow. Why now? Ethan shrugged. I don't know. But should we let her? I hesitated. Old wounds flared up. I remembered her yelling at Dad in the hospital hallway, accusing him of mismanaging Mom's care. I remembered slamming my bedroom door after she left. But I also remembered her bringing me books every birthday, calling me bright as moonlight. People change. I was learning that every day. Let her come, I said. Let's see who she is now. Aunt Claire arrived 2 weeks later in a sky blue sweater and thick glasses. She looked older, smaller, but her eyes were the same, soft, searching, and sharp when they needed to be. She hugged me so tightly I forgot how angry I used to be. I missed you, she whispered. I didn't say anything at first. But then I whispered back, I missed you too. We gave her the grand tour. She wept when she saw the family photo wall. She ran her fingers over the kitchen counter and said, Your mom spilled cranberry sauce here every Thanksgiving. And when she saw Dad's old guitar mounted in the music room, she smiled through tears. He'd love that, she said. That night, we sat around the fireplace and talked until it went cold. Claire apologized. Openly. Honestly. And I forgave her. Not because it erased everything, but because holding on to pain had already cost me enough. Ethan left in April. Not forever, just back to California for work. But this time, we said goodbye with plans. He'd return in June. We'd finish the landscaping together. Maybe even host a small summer gathering, friends, neighbors, whoever wanted to come see the house that grief built back stronger. Before he left, he hugged me and whispered, Thank you for opening the box. I smiled. Thank you for sending it. We stood in the doorway, just like the first time. Except now, there was no tension. Just love. And peace. After he left, I sat alone in the reading nook and flipped through one of Mom's old journals. Between the pages, I found a note she'd written, tucked inside as a placeholder. Love doesn't vanish, Hopper. It waits. It softens. It forgives. And when it's ready, it comes home. I closed the journal and leaned back. For the first time in years, I knew exactly what that meant. And I knew something else too. My brother was never really gone. He was just waiting for the right moment to come home. It's funny how a place can go from unbearable to sacred in just a few months. 6 months ago, I couldn't even look at Dad's old house without a knot forming in my stomach. Now I found myself humming as I swept the porch, as if it had always been mine. As if the ghosts inside had made peace and moved on, leaving room for something new, something alive. I took a photo that morning of the freshly planted tulips lining the walkway. Yellow, red, violet. Mom's favorites. I sent it to Ethan with a caption, "Next time, bring gloves. Dirt doesn't lie." He replied seconds later, "Are we gardeners now? I demand a raised bed and at least 3 tomatoes by July." I laughed out loud. It was small, that exchange. Insignificant, maybe. But to me, it meant everything. It meant we were still growing. Spring turned to early summer, and the house finally felt finished. Claire had visited again, bringing boxes of old family recipes and a framed portrait of Mom she found tucked behind a mirror. She started calling every Sunday, and her voice felt less like a stranger's and more like a tether to something I'd forgotten I needed, family chosen or not. Ethan and I FaceTimed regularly, and with each call, I watched him shed the weight he'd worn for years. His laugh came easier. His eyes looked clearer. The guilt didn't vanish, but it no longer defined him. He had even started therapy again. "I told my counselor I'd reconciled with you," he said one evening, eating chips on a video call. She asked me what changed. I said, she opened a box. I smiled, heart heavy and full. Funny how simple it sounds. "But it wasn't," he said. "You didn't just open the box. You forgave me. That's something I didn't think I'd ever earn." "You didn't earn it," I replied softly. "You asked for it. And that was enough." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I love you, Hopper." My breath caught. He used to say that all the time when we were kids. Shouted it across the backyard. Whispered it through my bedroom door when I was crying. But I hadn't heard it in years. "I love you too," I said. And I meant it with every beat of my healing heart. In June, he came back. Not just to visit this time, but with boxes. "I asked to work remotely twice a week," he said, dropping a suitcase by the front door. "And I found a sublet near my office for the other days. I want to split my time. Be here more." "You want to actually live here again?" I asked, eyes wide. "Yeah," he said, grinning. "I thought we could finally have that upstairs library you always wanted." I blinked, stunned. "You remember that?" He shrugged. "I remember everything. Especially the things I never gave you." So we built a library. Not a grand, Beauty and the Beast sort of space. But a cozy one. Shelves wall to wall. Warm lighting. A pair of armchairs by the window. We even made a little plaque that read, "Ellison Reading Room, where books and ghosts reside." I'd sit there on rainy afternoons, flipping through Mom's gardening journals, sipping tea from her old chipped mug, and watching Ethan tinker with music equipment in the next room. It wasn't perfect. We still had disagreements. He forgot to replace the toilet paper roll at least 4 times in a row. I reorganized the pantry in a way that messed with his snack flow. We argued over who really broke the blender, it was me, and once over whether pineapple belongs on pizza, it does, fight me. But those arguments weren't laced with resentment. They were ordinary. Normal. And after everything, normal felt like a miracle. Midsummer brought something neither of us expected. Ethan got a call from a woman named Violet. She was the daughter of an old friend of Dad's, someone we hadn't spoken to in years. "He told me your dad was the best man at his wedding," she said. "And, well, we just found a letter from him addressed to you and Harper. We didn't know what to do with it until now." Ethan drove 2 hours to pick it up. When he returned, he held the envelope like it was made of glass. We sat in the living room, both hesitant. "What if it's another secret?" I asked. "Something we didn't know?" "Or something we need to," he said. So we opened it. Inside was a letter, written in Dad's neat handwriting on thick stationery. "To Harper and Ethan. If you're reading this, it means I've failed to tell you something important face to face. And for that, I'm sorry. Years ago, after your mom passed, I struggled. More than you knew. And I almost lost myself. But one thing kept me going, thinking about the two of you. Your laughter. Your resilience. Your future. I want you to know that I saw you both. even when I didn't say it. I saw how strong Harper was, holding the family together. And I saw Ethan's pain, his need to run, not from us, but from his own guilt. I want you to forgive each other. Fully. Not with words, but with time. With life. Live in the space between forgiveness and love, and you'll find peace. Also, please check the attic wall near the chimney. There's something hidden there. A final project I never finished, but maybe you will. Love, Dad. Our jaws dropped. A secret? Ethan stood instantly. We're checking that now. I followed him up the stairs, hearts pounding like we were 12 years old again on a treasure hunt. We pulled boxes aside, shone flashlights at the bricks near the chimney, and then Ethan tapped one. It sounded hollow. 5 minutes later, we pulled away a loose panel to reveal a small wooden box with a leather strap. Inside? Blueprints. Detailed, intricate blueprints. A cabin. Nestled in woods. Surrounded by gardens. In the corner of the page, written in Dad's handwriting, for after the storm. A place to breathe again. We stared at each other. He was going to build this? I whispered. Maybe for retirement, Ethan murmured. Or for us. A second envelope was tucked inside the box. It contained a note. If this ever finds you, and if your hearts are still open, build it. Together. We didn't speak for a long time. But our decision was clear. That summer, we found a small plot of land outside town. Nothing fancy. Just trees, space, and silence. And we started building. Not just a cabin. A promise. To ourselves. To our parents. To each other. Some weekends, we drove out there with blueprints and sandwiches. Ethan handled the logistics. I picked colors and fabrics. Claire visited with her dog and approved our decisions with cookies. We laughed. We got covered in paint and sawdust. We bickered over whether the reading nook should have a skylight, it should, and whether there should be a porch swing or rocking chairs, both. And through it all, we healed. The cabin became more than a structure. It became our second chapter. A physical representation of everything we lost and found again. And when it was finally done, white trim, deep green shutters, wooden steps warmed by the sun, we stood side by side, hearts full. This, I said, voice trembling, is what forgiveness looks like. Ethan nodded. It's home. There are some mornings when the light filters through the trees just right, casting long golden ribbons across the porch floor, and I find myself pausing, hand wrapped around a mug of coffee, heart full of something I used to call sorrow. But now I call it peace. It's been a year since Ethan sent the box. A year since I hesitated to open it. A year since the words "Do you want to come home for Christmas?" left my lips, carrying more weight than I ever realized. So much has changed since then. Some changes are easy to see, the house, the cabin, the garden Ethan now obsesses over like a suburban dad with a new hobby. But other changes, the deeper ones, those are harder to name. They live in the quiet moments. Like this one. Standing on the cabin porch, watching dew melt from the leaves, listening to the birds chatter like old friends, I realize something that stops me in my tracks. This place, the life we rebuilt, it never would have existed without that gift. Without that leap. Without that box. Ethan moved back full-time in September. He found a job at a non-profit downtown, helping with community youth programs, teaching music, mentoring, sometimes just sitting with kids who felt like the world had already counted them out. He's good at it. Better than I've ever seen him at anything. It's funny, he said one night as we sat by the cabin fire pit, stars scattered above us. I used to think I was too broken to be any good to anyone. Turns out I just needed to stop hiding. You were never broken, I said gently. Just hurting. He didn't respond, but I saw the way his shoulders eased. The way his eyes shimmered. That was response enough. In October, we hosted a harvest dinner. Friends. Neighbors. Aunt Claire. Even Karen from the hospital and her husband. The cabin was warm with food and music and laughter. At one point, Ethan stood to make a toast. I don't usually do speeches, he began, holding a glass of cider, but tonight feels like it deserves one. Everyone quieted. He turned to me. A year ago, I thought I'd lost my sister for good. And I deserved to. I left. I ran. I didn't answer when she needed me most. But somehow, she found room in her heart to forgive me. He glanced around. This cabin, this family, this moment wouldn't exist without that. Without her. My cheeks burned, but I didn't look away. I once heard someone say that forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened, it's about choosing what comes next. And I'm grateful every day that she chose this. He raised his glass. To second chances. To family. And to never taking a single moment for granted again. We all toasted. I hugged him tighter than I had in months. Claire cried. No surprise there. Around Thanksgiving, I started volunteering again. There was a small clinic on the east side of town, underfunded but full of heart. They needed help with patient coordination, weekend shifts, outreach programs. I found myself stepping in, one weekend at a time, until I realized I wanted to stay. I quit the hospital in December. Told them I needed something smaller. More personal. Something that felt like healing. They understood. Now every week I walk into a space that reminds me why I became a nurse in the first place. Not for the pay or the schedule, but for the chance to be there when someone needs a hand to hold. It's quieter work. But it's good work. And I think Mom would be proud. Christmas came again, full circle. This time, Ethan and I decorated the cabin together. We chopped down our own tree from the nearby farm, baked gingerbread cookies that turned out more like gingerbread abstract sculptures, and exchanged gifts in front of the fireplace. I got him a first edition copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. He once told me it was the only book that made him cry. He got me something simple. A framed photo. It was of us, standing side by side on the porch, arms around each other, faces lit with sunlight and quiet joy. It had been taken by Claire a few weeks earlier. But it wasn't just the photo that made me cry. It was the inscription on the back. Harper. This is my favorite version of us. Not perfect. Not polished. Just real. Thank you for opening the box. Love, E. I couldn't speak. I just hugged him. And in that hug, I felt the full weight of everything we had been through, every silence, every wound, every fragile step towards something whole again. I keep the box on a shelf in the library now. The one he sent. It's worn and slightly faded, but I dust it regularly. Not because I expect to open it again, but because it reminds me of the moment everything changed. Sometimes, visitors ask about it. What's in there, they say. And I smile and reply, a beginning. Because that's what it became. A new beginning. Not long ago, I visited Dad's grave. I hadn't been back since the funeral. I thought it would be too painful. Too hard. But it wasn't. I brought tulips, Mom's favorites, and sat for a while in the quiet. Then I whispered, "You were right." I laid the flowers gently and stood up, sunlight warming my shoulders. And in the distance, I swore I heard his voice say, "Good girl." I wish I could say everything's perfect now. That every scar has healed. That every piece of our family puzzle found its place. But that's not how life works. Some pieces stay missing. Some wounds never quite close all the way. And that's okay. Because now I know healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about living well in spite of it. It's about choosing love, even when it's complicated. Choosing family, even when it hurt you once. Choosing to open the box, even when you're afraid of what's inside. If you had told me a year ago that a simple cardboard box would lead to rebuilding my family, finding my purpose again, and rediscovering the beauty of forgiveness, I would have laughed. But here we are. In a cabin built with calloused hands and open hearts. Surrounded by the people who stayed. Thinking of the ones we lost. And knowing, deep in our bones, that we are not alone. Not anymore. Final words. If you've made it this far, thank you for walking through this story with me. Maybe you have someone in your life you haven't spoken to in years. Maybe you're waiting for a sign to reach out, or maybe you're waiting for them to. Consider this your sign. It might not come in a box. But it might just change everything.